I finished explaining my design for the earthen fortress to the craftsman. Iron-plated gates to stop blades and fire, arrow slits in the stone walls, and hidden oil ports on the roof to pour boiling oil on anyone trying to climb up. The craftsmen were amazed. They couldn't believe I came up with the whole plan so quickly. Some even called me a genius, which felt pretty good. Mac thought it over and said the building time could be cut down to half a year, maybe less. But he warned me this had never been done before, so there were no guarantees. I told him to just do his best and figure out the details. The whole workshop buzzed with excitement after that. If this worked, it would make Red Tide territory much stronger and boost our reputation across the north. And so, the Earthen Fortress project officially began. Meanwhile, far to the south, my father, Duke Calvin, was going through his morning routine, exercise, washing up, getting dressed, then sitting in his study to deal with a mountain of letters. Most of it was boring stuff: land management, money issues, noble marriages, settling disputes. Then he noticed a letter from me. He barely remembered who I was at first. After thinking for a moment, he recalled I was his 8th son, the one whose mother died early, the one with no talent. He had sent me north a few months ago just to satisfy the emperor's expansion order. Too many children to even keep track of, he sighed. He already had 10 daughters, 12 sons, and 2 concubines expecting more. His approach to parenting was simple: have enough kids, and some of them are bound to turn out well. His eldest son, Gaius, was already vice-captain of the Empire's elite Dragon Blood Knights. That strategy was working fine for him. He expected my letter to be a plea to come back south, but he opened it anyway. I had written to report that I arrived safely and things were running smoothly. Then I mentioned the big discovery: large deposits of cold iron ore and, even rarer, magic marrow ore on my land. My father laughed at that. Magic marrow ore was something mainly found in the Emerald Federation. The Iron Blood Empire had almost none. He figured I just got incredibly lucky and refused to believe I found it through any skill of my own. Still, it made the territory far more valuable. What surprised him more was what I asked for. He expected me to beg for luxuries, fine food, wine, women. Instead, I requested construction and mining craftsmen, grain, seeds, livestock, and bloodstone, a mysterious mineral that can test whether someone has the potential to become a knight. "This kid is smarter than I thought," he muttered. He started thinking about the bigger picture. The emperor had been cracking down on the old noble families lately. The 8 great houses were losing power while new rivals kept rising. Politics in the empire were getting dangerous, and even he felt the pressure. Maybe having a foothold in the north wasn't such a bad idea. He wasn't about to pour massive resources into my territory, but planting a small seed up north through me? That seemed worth a try. He called in his old steward, Bradley, and handed him my letter. He told Bradley to travel north with the supply team, secretly verify whether the magic marrow ore was real, and make sure it stayed hidden. Then he laid out what he would send me: a few experienced craftsmen and builders, a small knight squad for extra fighting power, and some money, food, tools, seeds, and livestock. Nothing extravagant, just enough to give me a chance. He made one thing clear: if I managed the territory well, the family would invest more. If I showed any sign of incompetence, they would pull everything back immediately. Bradley would be watching me in secret the whole time. My father walked to the window and looked toward the north. "Louis, I hope you won't disappoint me," he said quietly. Bradley moved fast. Less than a day after my father gave the order, he had already assembled a team and set off for the north. The group included 3 elite knights, 10 full knights, and 30 apprentice knights. On top of that, there were dozens of skilled craftsmen who knew building, mining, and metalworking. They brought dozens of carts loaded with flour, dried meat, and pickled vegetables, enough to survive even the harshest conditions. There were also cold-resistant crop seeds, livestock bred for icy climates, blackhorn cattle, coldland sheep, and tough war horses, plus a bloodstone and 3,000 gold coins. I woke up that morning and checked my daily intelligence system like I always do. The first piece of news made my eyes light up. The letter I sent to my old man actually worked. He noticed Red Tide territory's potential and was sending real support. Bradley himself was coming, which meant my father was taking this seriously. Bradley was one of the family's most trusted stewards, a core figure in household affairs. Having him here would also take some of the everyday management work off my shoulders. The second piece of news made me frown. Tomorrow evening, My friend Yorn Harvey would be ambushed by bandits while passing through Green Rock Canyon. I knew Yorn. He was one of the few friends my former self had in this world. Back when noble children trained together in the capital, I got bullied for having no talent, and Yorn got mocked for being clumsy. Two losers who stuck together. He always followed behind me and called me boss. What confused me was the title next to his name, Pioneer Baron. His father, Count Harvey, was a rising nobleman with plenty of wealth and only 2 children. Under the Northern Expansion Decree, Yorn didn't need to come north at all. So why was he here? More importantly, the intelligence said he was about to be attacked. The north was full of bandits because resources were scarce. Yorn probably had knights protecting him, but getting captured or killed was still very possible. He was my friend. I had to go save him. The third piece of news was just awkward. Apparently, a farmhand named Romeo and a native girl named Juliet got caught fooling around in the fields. I wasn't going to bother with that. More people in Red Tide territory was actually a good thing. I called Lambert in and gave the order right away. Gather the knights. We're heading to Green Rock Canyon. Lambert didn't ask questions. He thumped his chest plate and said, "Understood. I'll get everyone ready." Then he turned and marched out to assemble the men. That same night, out in Green Rock Canyon, Yorn was sitting by a campfire wrapped in a fur cloak, slurping hot porridge and looking like an overfed cat. He was bragging to his men about the old days in the capital. You know, back in the capital, those noble brats thought they owned the place, bullying everyone. But me and Lewis? We put them in their place. There were at least a dozen of them. Lewis punched one guy flat, and I grabbed a chair and smashed it right at them. They ran like scared dogs. Sure, Lewis was tough, but honestly, I was the real hero. Without me, he wouldn't have lasted. His knights smiled politely and didn't correct him. They were used to Yorn's habit of exaggerating his own role. But behind those smiles, they were worried. This lord of theirs didn't seem to understand how brutal the North really was. He thought 600 people and sheer enthusiasm were enough to build something here. He hadn't even set up a proper patrol, just tossed out a vague order before going back to his stories. In his mind, with dozens of knights and nearly 100 soldiers, what could possibly go wrong? Then the arrows came. Dozens of crossbow bolts rained down from both sides of the canyon walls, spinning through the cold air with deadly aim. A soldier took one straight through the throat and collapsed, his blood splashing across the stones by the fire. Before anyone could react, figures in white cloaks leaped down from the cliffs like ghosts, charging into the camp with knives drawn. Enemy attack! The shout barely left a soldier's mouth before one of the attackers tackled him and slit his throat. Blood sprayed. The scream cut short. The camp exploded into chaos. Kill them all. Take the cargo. The bandit leader swung his long blade and charged in with his men. Yorn's slaves and farmhands screamed and scattered in every direction, dropping everything they carried. His soldiers scrambled to draw weapons, but arrows were still raining down. Some got hit before they could even raise their shields. Yorn froze. His porridge bowl shattered on the ground. One second, he was bragging about the old days. The next, he was surrounded by chaos. His knights rushed to protect him, swords glowing with battle aura, horses charging into the enemy. 2 knights cut down the first attackers easily. But these weren't ordinary bandits. Most of them were trained warriors with battle aura of their own. A huge bandit chief swinging a giant axe wrapped in dark blue aura smashed a knight right off his horse, cracking the man's armor and drawing blood. The fighting got brutal. Yorn's knights were skilled and worked well together, but they were badly outnumbered. The defense line broke apart fast. "Boss, this fat one looks valuable," one bandit yelled. "Should we keep him for ransom?" "No." The bandit chief snapped. "Orders say bring him back for a sacrifice." Yorn went white with terror. His grand adventure in the north was about to end before it even started. Then came the thunder of hooves. Charge! I led my knights down the mountain path and slammed straight into the battlefield like a spear. We hadn't rushed in right away. We waited, watched, and let the bandits think they had already won. When they dropped their guard and Yorn's side was at its most desperate, that's when we struck, for maximum damage. "Boss, you're here." Yorn screamed at me with tears in his eyes. I ignored him. My eyes were locked on the enemy. "Move." My knights hit them like a storm. We'd been training together for a long time, and our teamwork was tight. Horses swept through the battlefield, blades flashing everywhere. A bandit raised his weapon, and a burning lance punched straight through his chest, pinning him to the ground. Lambert sent out a sword blast that launched 3 or 4 bandits into the air. They hit the ground as broken, bloody heaps. Most of the bandits couldn't even gather their aura before they were cut down. The ones who tried to run found themselves already surrounded by our cavalry. A few made it a couple of steps before lances caught them in the back. My knights weren't fighting. They were harvesting. The big bandit chief roared and swung his axe with everything he had, dark blue aura surging around him. But several of my knights closed in together, locking his movements with crossed swords and smashing him back with shields. A blade sliced through his aura defense. Blood sprayed. He stared in disbelief, then collapsed. After he fell, the rest gave up completely. The battle ended so fast that Yearn looked like he wasn't sure it had actually happened. I sat on my horse and surveyed the scene. The scattered bandits had been cleaned up. About 20 prisoners were left, tied up on the ground, wounded but still glaring at us with pure hatred. Lambert came over and said quietly, "Confirmed. They're all members of the Snow Sworn." I knew that name. The Snow Sworn were a rebel group from the old Snow Kingdom of the North. When the Empire conquered this region, it destroyed their royal court and killed their royals. The survivors hid in the wilderness, building strength and swearing to one day have their revenge. I walked toward the prisoners. When they saw me, their eyes burned with rage. "Imperial dogs. One day you'll pay in blood. Kill us. Someday you'll all be buried in this land. Invaders. You'll die cursing the day you came here." One of them spat blood at me. A knight kicked him flat and pressed a sword against his neck. But even then, none of them showed any sign of giving in. Their eyes were full of deep, old hatred. I watched them silently. These people had lived as bandits too long and were consumed by hate. There was no taming them, no turning them into anything useful. Keeping them alive would only mean trouble down the road. I didn't hesitate. I waved my hand calmly. "Execute them all." The soldiers dragged them away one by one. Blades flashed. Blood soaked into the dirt. I watched the snow-sworn prisoners being dragged away for execution while Yearn buzzed around me like an excited puppy, practically wagging his tail. "Boss, if it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. You're like a second parent to me. I always knew back in the capital that you were destined for greatness." "Cut the flattery," I said, giving him a look. "Why are you even here?" "I'm here to be a pioneer lord, obviously," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stared at him. "With your family situation, you shouldn't have been sent north," he shrugged. I volunteered. That caught me off guard. "What? My family's good stuff was never going to come my way anyway," he said casually. "Might as well go somewhere new. Besides, you're here too. I figured sticking with you beats sitting around at home being the boring younger son." "Your father agreed to this?" "Of course not. But I submitted the application myself, and the Emperor approved it fast." He grinned proudly. "After that, there was no going back." I didn't know what to say. Everyone else avoided the north like a plague, and this guy walked right into it on purpose. "I already picked a territory right next to yours," he went on, slapping my shoulder. "We're going to rule the north together and make everyone who looked down on us regret it." That actually made me laugh. I shook my head. "Fine. How many people and resources did you bring? Don't underestimate me." He patted his round belly confidently. "Over 600 people, craftsmen, soldiers, farmhands. Enough to be self-sufficient. My old man will send more later." Then he leaned in close and whispered, "Plus I've got 10,000 gold coins." I nearly choked. 10,000. That was 20 times what I had. New money nobles really are something else, I muttered. He laughed and slapped a heavy bag of gold into my hand. "A little gift, boss. You have to take it." "You saved my life?" I looked down at the bag. Had to be over 100 coins in there. "Do I look like a mercenary to you?" No. It's a token of respect." He waved his hands frantically. I sighed but pocketed the gold. I was broke, after all. I invited him to come eat at my place, but he said he needed to get his people settled first. We talked a bit more, then I headed back to Red Tide territory with my knights. Yearn stood at his camp waving and yelling, "Take care, boss. I'll come find you for drinks once I'm set up." I glanced back, smiled, and rode off without another word. Behind me, I could hear him shouting at his knights about charging toward their new territory to begin their great conquest. His men exchanged tired looks, but went along with it. Far away in the mountains, the Snow-Sworn had their hidden base camp. Several captured imperial nobles hung upside down from a strange altar, mouths gagged, eyes wide with terror. Cuts lined their bodies, and their blood dripped down into carved runes on the stone. Ancient god of the cold abyss, grant us your blessing of vengeance, a priest chanted in a low voice. Something stirred deep underground, a sickening, crawling sound, as if answering the prayer. A wave of freezing cold seeped up through the cracks. The bodies on the altar shriveled rapidly, their flesh devoured by something invisible. Eyes burst, blood poured from every opening, until nothing was left but dried-out husks. Their leader, Hero, watched it all from above without expression. He stared at the pool of blood and saw something else. His mother, 40 years ago, dragged through the dirt by Imperial soldiers and run through with a sword. He had been a small child, hiding in the shadows, watching it happen. His fingers tightened. The killing intent in him burned. Elder Grom approached him, wrapped in a heavy gray fur cloak, eyes clouded with worry. Hero, one of our squads didn't come back. I know, Hero said flatly. Grom hesitated, then spoke. If we keep going like this, it will end badly. Hero gave him a cold glance. Blood for blood, Grom sighed. That northern barbarian, which doesn't care about us. She's just using our hatred to clear the way for her own tribe. If she gives us weapons and a chance for revenge, what does it matter? Hero's voice was ice. And what have we gained? All I see is our warriors dying off, one by one. Grom slammed his walking stick on the ground, his voice sharper than usual. Enough, Hero's face darkened. Grom tried to continue, but Hero waved his hand. Take him away. Two warriors grabbed Grom by the arms and dragged him back. The old man didn't fight it. He just looked at Hero one last time and said coldly, "You'll regret this." Hero didn't watch him go. He turned back to the dying campfire. His mother's final moments played again in his mind. The blood, the screaming, the soldiers laughing. Blood. For blood, he whispered, his voice as cold as the northern wind. The fire went out. His eyes disappeared into the darkness. SIV started her first day as my secretary. I could tell she didn't think much of me. In her eyes, I was probably just another imperial noble pretending to be decent. She showed up at my room right on time. I was sitting cross-legged, practicing my breathing technique to build battle aura. She watched me carefully. I could feel her sizing me up, probably trying to figure out if I was the real deal or just putting on a show. When I finished, I noticed she had arrived early. "You're here early," I said with a casual smile. She just nodded. No words. She was wearing a plain leather coat from the craftsman's workshop. Looked sharp and practical. For a second I thought it might be fun to get her a maid outfit. But then I remembered it was freezing and I didn't even have proper servants anyway. Just an older woman who cleaned and did laundry. I told her I still had an hour of sword training before work started, so she'd have to wait. She nodded again. Still quiet. I went out to train with Lambert like I did every morning. He was a tough teacher, steady, powerful, every strike precise. I focused more on footwork and technique, dodging and looking for openings to counter. "Keep your feet steadier," Lambert said, then swung his sword straight down. I barely dodged, but he switched direction instantly and forced me to block. The impact sent me stumbling back, arms tingling. I knew SIV was watching from the side, probably thinking I was all show and no substance. And honestly, compared to Lambert, my swordsmanship was nothing special. But I wasn't going to quit. Every time Lambert asked if I wanted to go again, I said yes. After an hour, I sheathed my sword and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Let's go," I told SIV. "Time for Lord business. Don't be so tense. The secretary job is pretty simple. Today you just follow me around and write down what I do." She nodded. Understood. First stop was the training grounds to check on the soldiers. 120 men were running laps in formation, breathing hard, but nobody complaining. Last 5 laps. Pick up the pace. Move it. Did you even eat this morning? Push through. You're better than this. The night instructors ran alongside them, shouting encouragement. My training system was completely different from what other noble territories used. Most lords only trained basic fitness and individual weapon skills, passed down through a loose master-student system. The result was soldiers with shaky foundations who ended up as cannon fodder for blood knights on the battlefield. But I understood this world. Even the strongest legendary knight couldn't cut down thousands single-handedly. A typical apprentice knight could handle maybe 10 well-trained soldiers at most. And training one knight cost 100 times more than training a regular soldier. So I designed a system based on knowledge from my past life. Standardized drills focused on teamwork, quick reactions, and battlefield adaptability. These soldiers didn't have battle aura, but with proper training, they could still become a real fighting force. The soldiers stopped running and snapped to attention when they saw me. "Good morning, my lord," they shouted in unison, loud enough to echo off the walls. I nodded. "Good work. We're not tired," they roared back. They trained hard every day: fitness, formations, combat simulations. Nobody complained because they ate well, dressed warm, and I treated them with respect. That mattered to them. I could see it. I scanned the group and spotted a few with sloppy movements. On a real battlefield, that kind of slowness gets you and your comrades killed. Those soldiers broke into a cold sweat and snapped their heads down. 5 more laps. They turned and ran without hesitation, feet hitting the ground harder than before. SIV stood off to the side watching all of this. I could tell something was shifting in her head. She didn't fully understand my training methods, but she could see that my soldiers respected me, not out of fear, but something real. I didn't need to shout or make a big show of authority. When I spoke, they listened. No questions. I think she was starting to realize I wasn't quite the typical noble she had me pegged as. After leaving the training grounds, I took SIV down a dirt path and stopped at a small wooden cabin. Inside, the air smelled faintly of herbs. Haver, the knight who got injured fighting the frost giant a few days ago, was lying on a bed by the wall. He still looked pale, but much better than before. He tried to get up when he saw me, but I pushed him back down. "Don't move. You're not healed yet," he smiled awkwardly. "I'm feeling much better, my lord." "Don't push it," I said, pulling up a chair. "What did the doctor say?" "Stable, but recovery will take time." He looked down, frustrated. "I'm sorry for worrying you. You came back alive." "That's good enough," I sighed. "I'll find the right medicine to get your strength back as soon as I can." His voice cracked a little when he thanked me. I could tell he meant every word. Before I left, I told the guards to take good care of him. He teared up again. I noticed SIV watching the whole thing. She probably came in expecting me to be faking it, just putting on a show. But seeing how loyal Haver was, no pretending involved, I think it shook her a little. "Don't act like this is goodbye," I told Haver with a laugh, patting his shoulder. "Get better and don't rush back just to embarrass yourself." After that, SIV and I headed east toward the river. Morning light sparkled on the water. A few fishing boats sat along the bank while fishermen sorted their nets, laughing and chatting. The fishing operation had stabilized. We had more boats than before, but the catch was actually smaller, and that was on purpose. I had ordered wider mesh for the nets so young fish could escape. I also set fixed fishing hours and rest periods to give the river and the fish population time to recover. Sustainable fishing. It was the only way to keep this going long-term. Luke, my fishery officer, hurried over when he spotted me, wearing his usual flattering grin. I asked about the fish farming progress. "We've started trials," he said proudly, pointing at wooden rafts on the water. "We picked cold water species and set up a semi-enclosed breeding area. It was all thanks to your foresight, my lord. Without these rules, we'd have fished the river dry in a few years." "Good work," I said simply. He beamed. "Oh no, it's all your brilliant leadership." I just smiled and didn't respond. I could practically feel SIV rolling her eyes behind me. She thought the flattery was ridiculous, but even she had to admit that the people here actually trusted me. I glanced at her and caught the look on her face. I knew exactly what she was thinking, but I didn't bother explaining myself. "Let's go," I said, and we walked toward the farmlands. The fields stretched out under the morning sun, looking better than ever. The rye stalks were thick and strong, their dark green leaves swaying in the breeze. The potato plants were lush, and the turnips were growing well too. Everything was alive and healthy. Mick, my farming officer, was out inspecting the fields with a few farmers. He wiped the dirt off his hands and came over with an honest smile. "The turnips should be ready to harvest in about 2 weeks," he said. "Rye is coming along nicely, potatoes are doing fine too. Should be a good season." I looked over the fields. Neat rows, moist soil, clearly well maintained. "Nice work, Mick." He froze for a second, then grinned so wide he couldn't hide it. He clenched his fists like he was trying to hold the joy inside. Mick used to be a slave who dug in the dirt and wasn't even allowed to look a noble in the eye. I gave him his freedom and put him in charge of all the farmland in Red Tide territory. Now his biggest goal in life was to make this land feed as many people as possible. "I won't let you down, my lord," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I smiled and patted his shoulder. "Keep it up." Then I noticed how healthy and glowing he looked, and raised an eyebrow. So, how's married life treating you? His face went red instantly. Please don't tease me, my lord. I laughed. Just pace yourself. I don't want you too tired to work one of these days. The farmers around us cracked up. The whole mood lightened. From everything SIV had seen that morning, the injured knight, the training grounds, the fishery, the farms, I could tell her image of me was changing. I was no longer just a scheming noble in her mind. Whether she liked it or not, the people here genuinely respected me, and that was hard to fake. I caught her watching me as I chatted with the farmers, standing in the fields with the wind blowing through my hair. She seemed lost in thought for a moment, just staring. After the farms, I leaned toward SIV with a grin. Come on, I've got something good to show you. She gave me a suspicious look, but followed anyway. We arrived at a small workshop that smelled faintly sweet. Inside, a middle-aged woman named Doris was stirring a pot of syrup. She was one of the refugees who came north with me. A few days ago, my daily intelligence system told me she was skilled at making sugar, so I had people help her collect birch sap and try making birch candy. The first batch was already done. Today she was cooking the second. Outside, workers were carefully drilling holes into birch trees about a meter off the ground, inserting tubes, and letting the clear sap drip into wooden buckets. Doris reminded them not to take too much from each tree, no more than half a bucket per day, and to plug the holes with wooden stoppers afterward so the trees wouldn't be damaged. My lord, perfect timing. Doris lit up when she saw me. Yesterday's batch has cooled. It's ready to eat. She handed me a piece of golden, see-through birch candy. I popped it in my mouth. It was good, sweet with a hint of woodsy freshness. I grabbed another piece and held it out to SIV. Try one. She frowned and stared at it like I might have poisoned it. I laughed, tossed that piece into my own mouth, and crunched it loudly. See? Not poisoned. She carefully took the next one and put it in her mouth. Her eyes widened for just a second. The coldness on her face cracked, but she forced it back almost instantly and swallowed. It's okay, she said flatly, but the tiny curve at the corner of her lips gave her away. I grabbed a small bag of candy and stuffed it into her hands. If you like it, keep it. She clutched the bag, said nothing, and her ears turned red. I told Doris the candy tasted great and to keep producing more. She was thrilled, but I knew there was a problem. Birch sap could only be collected for a few weeks in spring. After that, the flow would stop. It wasn't enough to build a real industry around. Too bad the harvest window is so short, I said. Can't turn this into something we sell? Doris sighed in agreement. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe we can try planting fruit trees later and experiment with fruit sugar. That got her excited. I told her to take it slow and that we'd build a proper sugar workshop when the time was right. She promised to keep researching new recipes. I grabbed a small bag of candy for myself and pocketed it. The rest I told a knight to bring to the children at the school. I had set up what I called a school, though it was really more of a daycare. Kids under 13 gathered there, looked after by a few women. They learned some basics, and their parents were free to work. Luckily, there weren't too many children in red tide territory, otherwise the system would have collapsed. Once kids turned 13, they started working, helping with fishing and things like that. When we arrived at the school, one of the caretakers was in the middle of telling a story about me. Lord Lewis had just come back from slaughtering orcs with his knights, armor still dripping with green blood. They were cleaning up after a celebration feast late at night when he stepped on a rock, looked up at the sky, and yelled, "You stupid dragon! You think you can keep flying over my land?" Then he picked up a stone, wound his arm back, and hurled it into the sky. It shot up like a red streak of light and punched a hole through the clouds. There was a terrible scream, and a 30-meter frost dragon came spiraling down and crashed into the pine forest. I felt SIV's eyes slowly turn toward me. The look on her face was pure, silent judgment. I coughed awkwardly. They made that up themselves. She crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. Oh, is that so? I looked away. Then a kid spotted me at the door. "The Great Lord is here." The whole room erupted. Children swarmed around me, jumping up and down, reaching out their little hands. This clearly wasn't my first visit. I sighed but smiled and patted the nearest kid on the head. I took the candy bag from the knight and started handing out pieces. The kids cheered and stuffed the candy into their mouths. When the sweetness hit, their faces lit up with pure, innocent happiness. I glanced at SIV. She was watching the children's smiles, and for the first time, the heaviness she always carried seemed to lighten, just a little. That evening, SIV and I sat down for dinner with a few knights in the dining hall. The meal was simple: smoked fish, hot wheat porridge, rough bread, and a bit of pickled cabbage. A few dim oil lamps lit the room. The wooden walls had cracks in them. Nothing fancy at all. I could tell SIV was surprised. She probably expected a noble's table to be covered in gold-trimmed cloth with silver plates and fine wine. But this was all we had, and it was only a little better than what the regular folk ate. I noticed her expression and asked if the food wasn't to her liking. She quickly shook her head and took a sip of porridge. Halfway through the meal, she asked what I had planned for the evening. Wolf training, I said. Her eyes lit up at that. Every week, I spent a few evenings at the beast training grounds, working with my Ice Plains wolf, Cold Edge. After weeks of training, he was starting to respond to my commands, but we still needed more time to build full trust. Tonight, I practiced hunting whistle signals, a system of sounds that tell the animal what to do during hunts, patrols, or combat. Different tones and rhythms mean different commands. I raised the whistle to my lips and blew one long, high note. Cold Edge tensed up and dropped low to the ground, ready to pounce. 2 short notes. He leaped forward and tore into the cloth target with his fangs, ripping it apart. A rapid series of trembling notes. He froze instantly, scanned the area, released his grip, and sprinted back to my side. Clean, smooth, tactical. I was pleased. I scratched his neck and said, "Good job," then pulled out a piece of cut meat. He looked at me first, waited for my nod, then snapped it up. He was learning discipline. Edgar, the beast trainer, came over and said my progress with Cold Edge was faster than he expected. But he reminded me that Ice Plains wolves aren't ordinary animals. Trust and obedience had to be built slowly. I noticed SIV had gone quiet. She was staring at Cold Edge with a dark, distant look in her eyes. I asked her what was wrong. She was silent for a moment, then said flatly, "I used to have an Ice Plains wolf too. It's dead now." Her voice was calm, like she was talking about someone else's life, but I could see her fingers digging into her palms. I thought for a second, then pointed to the pen where we kept a litter of wolf pups. "Want to pick one and raise it?" She froze, then slowly turned toward the pups, a pile of fuzzy little things curled up together. Her gaze moved across them one by one until it landed on a small pup in the corner. Its fur was pale silver gray, and its eyes were ice blue, apparently similar to the wolf she had lost. She walked over and reached out her hand. The pup sniffed her fingers nervously, then licked her palm. Her eyes turned red. She gently stroked its soft fur. "I'll call you Lone Moon," she whispered. The little wolf whimpered softly, as if answering her. Tears slid down her face and dropped onto its fur without a sound. When it got late, I stretched and told her, "That's it for today. Go back and write up the day's record." She nodded and left. I had given her a private room since she was one of only 3 people in the territory who could read and write. The pup stayed behind. It hadn't fully bonded with her yet. Back in her room, SIV sat at her desk, lit an oil lamp, and opened her notebook. She wrote down everything from the day: the soldier training, the farm and fishery inspections, the visit to the injured knight, the birch candy workshop. She stared at the notes for a long while. Then on a separate piece of paper, she wrote 4 words: "He's a good person." She looked at it, got a little annoyed with herself, and muttered, "Probably just an act," but she didn't really believe that anymore. She popped a piece of birch candy into her mouth. The sweetness spread, carrying that faint scent of forest wood. She leaned back in her chair and murmured softly, Sweet. Spring had arrived, but the north was still bitterly cold. Bradley and his team were finally approaching Red Tide territory. I knew a bit about what to expect from my intelligence system, but seeing the full convoy in person was something else. I rode out on my black warhorse with Cold Edge standing at my feet to meet them on the road. Bradley was exactly how I remembered, an old man with a stone-cold expression, sitting perfectly upright on his horse. He was one of the most powerful figures in the Calvin family, and even the knights in his convoy were too afraid to speak freely around him. I could tell he was sizing me up the moment he saw me. He probably expected some helpless, pathetic young lord barely surviving in the wilderness. Instead, he found me calm, properly dressed in a wolf fur cloak, with a tamed Ice Plains wolf at my side. I could see his opinion of me shift just a little. I rode forward and greeted him respectfully. "Mr. Bradley, thank you for the long journey. Welcome to Red Tide territory." He returned the greeting with perfect formality, polite but cold. The Duke sent me with some support. He hopes it will be of use to you. I'm grateful for my father's concern, I said. I scanned what he brought. 3 elite knights, 10 full knights, 30 apprentice knights, dozens of craftsmen and doctors, carts of flour, dried meat, and pickled vegetables, cold-resistant seeds, black-horned cattle, coldland sheep, war horses, far more than I had expected. The old man actually came through. It was still pocket change for the Calvin family, but for me it was huge. Bradley told me plainly, repeating my father's exact words, "If you manage the territory well, the family will invest more. If you show any incompetence, all support gets pulled immediately." I just smiled. I'll make good use of this chance. What happened next was the interesting part. As we rode into the territory, I watched Bradley's face change. At first, the outskirts looked like any other northern wasteland, barren and lifeless. I could practically see him thinking, just as I expected, but the deeper we went, the more his expression shifted. He saw the farmland first, crops growing strong, nearly ready for harvest, while other territories in the north were still in the planting stage. New land was being cleared at the same time. His eyebrows twitched. Then he noticed the rows of neat semi-underground longhouses lining the roads. All new construction. Basic, but solid. Red Tide territory had not only solved the survival problem, but was already expanding its infrastructure, ahead of territories that had existed for years. But what really shook him were the people. As we passed through, the way the residents looked at me wasn't the fear subjects usually show their lord. It wasn't even simple gratitude. It was something closer to genuine devotion, almost like faith. I didn't say anything. I just kept writing. But I could feel Bradley's gaze on my back, and I knew the calculations in his head were being completely rewritten. He had come here expecting a useless young lord wasting resources in a frozen wasteland. What he found was a territory that was thriving, a population that was loyal to its core, and a leader with more control over his domain than even my father had over the South. I had told my father things were going well in my letter, but I kept it modest on purpose. Seeing is believing, and right now, Bradley was believing. As we neared the center of the territory, I caught something rare, a faint smile on the old steward's lips. I heard him mutter under his breath, "At least it won't be boring up here." 2 days later, I took Bradley, a master miner named Valentine, and a team of mining specialists deep into the heart of Red Tide territory to see the magic marrow mine. Bradley still had his doubts. He didn't believe a deposit this significant could exist out here. He figured I had exaggerated in my letter. We passed through the forest, and the mine opened up before us. Knights in heavy armor stood guard at the entrance. They saluted as we approached. "All clear, my lord." When we actually stepped inside, everyone went silent. The sheer size of the deposit left them stunned. The temperature was warmer underground. The rock walls glowed a deep, eerie purple, shimmering with faint magical energy. You could feel the power humming in the air. Valentine, a lifelong mining veteran, reached out and ran his trembling fingers along the rock face. His eyes were wild with excitement. "This mine could rank in the top 20 across the entire Iron Blood Empire," he said, barely keeping his voice steady. The other craftsmen started whispering to each other. "The reserves are unbelievable. The purity looks extremely high. If we dig deeper, we might find crystallized high-grade marrow." A few of them were stroking the walls like they were touching treasure, which I suppose they were. Bradley snapped at them to keep quiet. They went silent, but none of them could wipe the excitement off their faces. I could tell Bradley was shaken too, even though he hid it well. He hadn't believed me, but now he was seeing it with his own eyes. I watched him mentally recalculating the value of this territory. Magic marrow wasn't just for making explosive powder. Ground into dust, it could enchant weapons to cut through iron. Alchemists needed it for powerful potions. High-purity marrow was essential for magic circle construction. This wasn't just a valuable resource. It was a strategic asset that could shift the balance of power across the entire North. Bradley rode up beside me and lowered his voice. "Young master, the fewer people who know about this mine, the better." I waited for him to continue. "The Calvin family name keeps most people from bothering you. But this is the North, too far from the family's reach. There will be people willing to take the risk for something this valuable." He watched my face closely, testing me. I kept calm and gave him a small smile. "I know. Other than what I wrote to my father, I haven't told anyone." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. I could see him making a mental note to report back to the Duke and request more knights. This mine was worth protecting. Meanwhile, Valentine got to work assessing the site. He walked through the tunnels, tapping the walls with his mining hammer, listening to the echoes. This dark purple area here, extremely high marrow content, he said, crouching by a glowing section. Crystallized zones like this mean top grade ore, but they're fragile. One wrong move, and the crystals shatter. He tapped another section. The sound was deep and solid. This part is stable. Good for digging. Then a few steps further, another tap, hollow this time. Not here. The rock is too weak. Mining this spot would cause a collapse. The craftsman marked everything on the walls as he directed. I stood back and watched with my arms crossed. I didn't know much about mining, but I could tell Valentine was the real deal. The family sent real experts, I said. Your skill is impressive. The craftsman perked up at the compliment. Being praised by their lord clearly meant something to them. Valentine went on to explain that magic marrow released energy waves that could poison miners over time. We'd need ventilation shafts for airflow, sealed passages to prevent gas buildup, black birch support beams every 5 meters to keep the tunnels stable, main tunnels 3 meters wide, side tunnels 1.5 meters. You clearly know what you're doing, I told him. He puffed out his chest proudly. Of course, I've spent my whole life in mines. I could walk these tunnels blindfolded. I patted his shoulder and smiled. Then the mining plan is all yours, he grinned. Much appreciated, my lord. Once the full survey was done, Valentine wasted no time getting the mine operational. He had workers cutting black birch wood into standard sizes for support beams, placing them every 5 meters through the tunnels. He personally tapped each beam with his hammer to check it was solid. Carpenters sealed every joint with wooden wedges and tree resin to make sure nothing shifted over time. The first group of slave miners suited up with basic protective gear and began carefully chipping away at the most stable section. Every time a pickaxe struck the wall, the purple veins of ore would glow faintly, like something ancient was waking up underground. The first batch of raw ore went straight to Silco, Red Tide Territory's only alchemy apprentice. I told him to test the purity. He dropped a small piece into a testing solution. The liquid lit up purple, then darkened to a deep, rich violet, the sign of extremely high-grade magic marrow. My lord, the purity is even higher than expected, he said, barely containing himself. I allowed myself a small smile. That was the confirmation I needed. That night, I sat down with Bradley in my study. I got straight to the point. I want the mining and processing to stay here in Red Tide Territory. Sales go through the Calvin family. Bradley paused for a second, then gave me a knowing look. I understand. I had my reasons. I still needed the family's backing, so I couldn't act too independent too soon. I had to give them enough profit to keep them investing in me. The Calvin family had trade routes across the entire empire and even into other nations. Building anything close to that on my own would take years. But the processing technology, that had to stay in my hands. If things ever changed, if the Duke died or the family turned on me, I'd lose the sales channel. But as long as I controlled how the marrow was refined, I could always rebuild. I'd never be completely at someone else's mercy. Bradley saw right through my thinking. I could tell, but he didn't call it out. He simply said he'd draft a letter to the Duke with my proposal and let my father decide. Then I opened a heavy wooden chest. Gold coins gleamed inside, about 1,500 of them. Between what my father sent and what I already had, I was suddenly richer than I'd ever been. But gold sitting in a box was useless. What Red Tide Territory needed most was people. I want to convert these coins into slaves, I told Bradley. A flicker of approval crossed his eyes. You clearly have a plan. Based on our current food production and reserves, 1,500 people is the maximum I can support, I said. I wasn't being greedy. Too many mouths to feed would destabilize everything I'd built. Leave it to me, he said, and he made it look effortless. He wrote one letter. Just one. Within days, slave traders traveled all the way to Red Tide Territory to personally deliver a hand-picked batch. They were polite, almost nervous, careful not to offend Bradley in any way. They even lowered their prices without being asked. The quality was far above what I'd gotten when I went to the black market myself. Most were strong, healthy laborers. There were also women of marrying age, which would be critical for growing the population long-term. The most shocking part was the cost. After buying 1,500 slaves, I still had 700 gold coins left. Much cheaper than I expected, I said, watching the new arrivals file in. Bradley smiled faintly. Market prices depend on who's buying. He was right. If anyone else showed up with the same money, they'd get half the quantity and worse quality. But Bradley wrote one letter with the Calvin family name behind it, and traders fell over themselves to deliver their best stock at a discount, just to stay in the family's good graces. So this was the power of the Calvin family's old steward. It wasn't just negotiation skill. It was something deeper, the way power itself worked in this world. I felt grateful to be part of the Calvin family, but I also knew that without proving myself, I'd never have access to this kind of influence. 2 months ago, I wouldn't have even been allowed to touch it. Then a thought crept into my mind. What if one day I could fully control this power? What if the entire Calvin family's strength worked for me? I pushed that ambition back down. Not yet. I turned to Bradley. Thank you for everything. He gave a slight nod, his expression as composed as ever. Serving you is my duty. The new slaves arrived in chains, led by the traders into red tide territory. I could see the fear in their eyes. They had no idea what was waiting for them. But when they walked in and saw clean houses, neat roads, and the smell of cooking in the air, they froze. This wasn't what a slave camp was supposed to look like. Even the soldiers guarding them weren't sneering or spitting insults. They just kept order calmly. I think that confused the slaves even more. The nicer things looked, the more nervous they got. The next morning, I gathered all 1,500 of them in the main square. Welcome to red tide territory, I said. That threw them off. They'd been bought and sold like goods, and now someone was welcoming them. I told them this place could be different from anywhere they'd been before. I promised stable food, shelter, and meaningful work. Their labor wouldn't be wasted. Then I said the part that mattered most. If you work hard enough, you can earn your freedom. The square erupted. People gasped, whispered, shouted. Most of them didn't believe it. They'd heard too many lies from too many masters. Some laughed bitterly. Others just stood there, stunned. I didn't try to convince them with more words. Tom would do that for me. Over the next few days, things started to shift. The slaves noticed their meals were bigger than anything they'd gotten before. A single breakfast here was more food than a full day's rations at their old camps. The beds were better than straw mats. Nobody was being whipped or screamed at. But what really changed their minds were the free citizens. Former slaves, walking around in decent clothes, heads held high, working as craftsmen and farmers. One young slave worked up the courage to ask a man repairing the road if he used to be a slave. The man smiled. Used to be. The young slave could barely speak. But, you're free now? Because I worked hard. The Lord gave me my freedom. He patted the kid's shoulder. Do good work, and he won't let you down. Stories like that spread fast. The new slaves saw former slaves everywhere, in the fields, in the blacksmith shop, living real lives. The doubt started cracking. Maybe freedom wasn't just an empty promise after all. Slowly, the fear faded. People stopped just going through the motions and actually started working with purpose. They began to genuinely respect me. Whenever I walked through the mine or the workshops, they'd stop and watch me pass. And the look in their eyes wasn't just obedience anymore. It was trust. Of course, adding 1,500 people overnight brought problems too. Food wasn't a big issue. Between our reserves and what the family sent, we had enough. But housing got tight fast. Red tide territory had been built for a much smaller population. I crammed the new arrivals into the existing longhouses alongside the original residents, sharing space. In most places, that kind of crowding would have caused fights. But here, people stayed calm because they trusted me when I said new houses were coming soon. And they were. The builders had already started laying foundations on the outskirts, working faster than anyone expected. Just bear with it a little longer, I told them. More houses are on the way. Complaints stayed low, but housing was only the short-term headache. What really worried me was sanitation. One afternoon, I went to inspect the new residential area. The buildings were fresh. You could still smell sawdust on the beams. From a distance, everything looked orderly. But as I walked deeper in, I noticed garbage piling up along the paths. The air had a musty, rotting smell, and around one corner, there was a yellowish-brown puddle glistening in the sunlight that made my stomach turn. For now, it wasn't a crisis. But with this many people packed together, water contamination, waste buildup, and poor hygiene would become serious threats. If disease broke out, we didn't have nearly enough doctors to handle it. I wasn't going to let poor sanitation ruin everything I'd built. First, we're building toilets, I told the gathered craftsmen and workers. Most of them looked confused. They figured digging a hole in the ground was good enough. I picked the locations myself. far from water sources, away from main roads, and downwind from the living areas. Each toilet had 2 pits side by side, each about 2 meters deep. The idea was simple. Use one pit for 6 to 12 months, seal it up to let it turn into fertilizer, then switch to the second pit. Repeat forever. Since almost nobody could read, I had someone draw pictures explaining the rules and hung them on every toilet wall. Things like, don't relieve yourself on the ground, cover the pit when you're done, and don't throw garbage in the toilet. I backed it up with a strict order. Follow the rules or face punishment. People didn't understand why any of this mattered. They'd been squatting wherever they pleased their whole lives. But nobody argued. They trusted me enough to just do it. Next was water. I couldn't let people keep scooping water straight from the river anymore. I had teams test several streams and pick the cleanest one. Then we built a stepped sand filter, 3 layers. Coarse gravel on the bottom to catch mud and big particles. Fine sand in the middle to trap smaller stuff and clear the water. And on top, crushed birch charcoal to remove bad smells and filter out some bacteria. I watched the first batch of filtered water flow into the storage barrel. It was so clear you could see the sand at the bottom. I scooped up a cup, checked for any strange smell, and nodded. This is drinkable. I assigned a few reliable soldiers and managers to test the water quality every day and report anything unusual immediately. When the residents tried it, their faces lit up. It's sweeter than river water. No more of that muddy taste. People quickly accepted the new rule of getting drinking water only from the filtration point. Then came the cleaning. I picked a dozen trustworthy people and formed a sanitation crew. I gave them brooms, buckets, and lime, and told them to patrol every corner of the territory daily. No spot could be missed. But that wasn't enough. Hygiene had to be everyone's job. So I created a monthly cleaning day. Every single person, soldiers, civilians, slaves, even knights, had to participate. No exceptions. The first cleaning day came. The bell rang at dawn, and everyone gathered in the square with brooms and shovels. I could see the reluctance on a lot of faces. So before anyone could complain, I grabbed a broom and started sweeping. The whole square went quiet. Soldiers stared. Slaves couldn't believe what they were seeing. A noble, doing the same dirty work as them. Then one soldier muttered, "If the Lord's doing it," and started sweeping too. After that, everyone followed. I didn't give any speeches. I just swept. By the time I looked up, even the people who'd been most resistant were working hard, scrubbing every alley, every animal pen, every corner of the market. By sunset, the territory was spotless. The air actually smelled fresh. At first, plenty of people thought my obsession with toilets, water filters, drainage ditches, and cleaning crews was just a young lord's passing fancy. They figured I'd get bored and drop it. But weeks passed, and people started noticing things. The streets were clean. The alleys didn't stink anymore. The water tasted good. Nobody was getting stomach problems like before. Fewer people were getting sick at all. They'd always assumed filth was just normal life. Now they realized a place could actually be clean and comfortable. The complaints disappeared. Nobody missed the old way. Bradley stood on a hill overlooking the territory one day. He'd managed estates across the empire and seen how most noble territories operated. He told me later that even the streets around the Calvin family's own headquarters in Cloud Tide City weren't as clean as Red Tide territory. Interesting, he murmured to himself, and I could tell his opinion of me had gone up another notch. Far to the south, my father sat in his study reading Bradley's second letter from Red Tide territory. He hadn't expected much, but as he read, his casual expression slowly disappeared. Bradley reported everything. The farms producing ahead of schedule, housing built faster than established territories, the Magic Marrow mine successfully opened with a proper extraction plan, 1,500 new slaves integrated smoothly. All of it far beyond what any other pioneer lord in the north had achieved. My father knew Bradley well. If anyone else had written that letter, he would have assumed they'd been bribed. But Bradley was the family's most loyal steward. He didn't exaggerate. What struck my father most was what Bradley said about how the people of Red Tide territory followed me. Not out of fear, not because of the Calvin family name, but because of me. Bradley used the word fanatical to describe their respect. My father admitted that even across the entire Iron Blood Empire, very few lords could inspire that kind of loyalty. He'd originally sent me north to get rid of me, maybe squeeze out one last drop of usefulness. He never imagined I'd actually build something real. He congratulated himself on his Have lots of children, strategy, like a lottery, buy enough tickets, and eventually you win something. Then he got to the part about the magic marrow mine deal I proposed. Sales rights go to the family, but processing stays with me. This kid has big ambitions, he muttered. He saw right through it. I was willing to depend on the family for now, but I was keeping a card in my hand for the future. If I ever needed to break away, controlling the processing technology meant I'd never be completely powerless. He wasn't angry. He actually found it interesting. But he wasn't ready to go all in on me either. I hadn't fully established myself yet. The North was unpredictable. My potential was promising, but unproven at scale. So he made his decision carefully. Money. He'd send another 1,000 to 1,500 gold coins. Enough to keep things stable, but not enough to expand comfortably. If I wanted to grow, I'd have to figure out how to make money on my own. Military. 2 more night squads, officially to protect the mine. Really, it was a safety net, so I wouldn't get wiped out before I had a chance. But it wasn't enough to dominate anything. If I had real talent, I could build on it. If I couldn't even hold my ground with this much help, then I wasn't worth investing in. Talent. A few alchemy apprentices to help with basic marrow refining. Everything else, recruiting, networking, making deals, I'd have to handle myself. Politics. No official backing, but no restrictions either. I could ally with whoever I wanted in the North, negotiate however I saw fit. Just one rule, don't cause problems for the family. My father saw me as a chess piece dropped onto a battlefield. He wanted to see if I'd charge forward or get trampled. If I couldn't handle the pressure, then dying in the North was simply what I deserved. He had plenty of other children. Losing 1 or 2 meant nothing to him. The family never lacked for blood, only for people with real ability and ambition. But the fact that I'd gotten this far, that I'd earned such high praise from Bradley, told him I had at least some talent and some spine. Fine then, he thought. Show me what you've really got. After sorting out the problems that came with 1,500 new slaves, Red Tide territory was growing faster than I'd imagined. New houses went up within a month, wasteland got cleared and planted, and people finally had hope on their faces. This barren patch of nothing was turning into a real territory. I looked over the reports Bradley had put together and nodded. The foundation was solid. Time for the next step. I picked up the bloodstone, a deep red crystal that shimmered like liquid blood. It was a special magical mineral that could test whether someone had the potential to become a blood knight. Only people with knight bloodlines could make it react. I pricked my finger with a dagger and let the blood drip onto the stone. It trembled and glowed dark red. So I had the potential too. The stone could only tell you yes or no, though, not how strong your talent was. That didn't worry me. My daily intelligence system would flag any truly gifted kids eventually. What I wanted now was to find which children in Red Tide territory carried the knight bloodline. I was going to build my own knights, not borrowed from the family, but handpicked, trained, and shaped by me. Knights who would be completely loyal to me and to Red Tide territory alone. We gathered over 200 children in the main square, most under 15. They were buzzing with excitement, eyes locked on me. These were kids of refugees and natives, children whose parents I'd saved from starvation. Through their teachers and families, they'd grown up seeing me as something close to the sun itself. Today, I'm going to select some of you to become knights, I said. The square erupted with chatter. Does that mean we get swords and horses? Can we protect Red Tide territory like Lord Lewis? Could I really be a knight? To these kids from the very bottom of society, being a knight meant one simple thing. Standing beside me, fighting alongside their leader, being part of something great. Quiet. One at a time, the testing began. Each child walked up to the table where the bloodstone sat, glowing faintly. They pricked their finger and let a drop of blood fall onto the stone. At first, everyone was excited. But as kid after kid stepped up and the stone did nothing, the mood started sinking. Disappointment spread through the crowd. I felt it too, but I didn't let it show. This was how it worked. Only a rare few would have the gift. Then a small girl stepped forward and let her blood fall on the stone. It glowed. It trembled. Dark red light pulsed from its surface. Everyone held their breath. It's her. She's going to be a knight, the kids whispered. The girl just stood there, staring at the stone, shaking, not fully understanding what had just happened. I put a hand on her shoulder. What's your name? Lilia, she said quietly. Congratulations, Lilia. You're the first knight that Red Tide territory will raise. Her legs nearly gave out. Tears filled her eyes. She couldn't believe it. The other children stared at her with envy, whispering about how lucky she was. Hearing that, she straightened up proudly, even though her knees were still wobbling. I smiled at her. I look forward to seeing what you become. After Lilia, the energy in the square came rushing back. Every kid was sure they'd be the next one chosen. But reality was harsh. By the time half the children had been tested, only 3 had passed. In the crowd, I noticed a small boy watching everything with wide eyes, half hopeful, half terrified. He wanted to be a knight. He wanted to stand by my side and repay me for everything I'd done for his family. His name was Vel. Among the children waiting to be tested, there was a small boy named Vel. I already knew his story. 2 years ago, when he was only 10, orcs attacked his village. He lost everyone. Family, friends. His entire home turned to rubble. Only his mother survived, dragging him into the forest. They had no food, no water, just whatever wild fruit they could find. Then slave traders caught them. His mother tried to help him escape, but they both ended up on the auction block. He remembered standing there like a piece of merchandise, starving, wearing rags, stripped of every shred of dignity. His mother held him close and endured it all in silence. Then I showed up at that slave market and bought them along with hundreds of others. I brought them to Red Tide territory and gave them a home. Vel ate a full meal for the first time he could remember. He wore warm clothes. He felt safe. His mother started working at the smoked fish workshop, washing, salting, smoking, never slacking off. She earned her way with her own hands. When I heard about her dedication, I freed both her and Vel, giving them full citizen status. That day, his mother, a woman who never cried, held him and sobbed. After that, Vel had one goal in life, to repay me. So when his name was called, his heart was practically exploding. He walked up to the platform on shaking legs, pricked his finger, and let the blood fall onto the stone. The bloodstone flickered, then it glowed red. He dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I did it. I really did it. My lord, I swear my loyalty to you. I reached down and lifted him up. No need to get so worked up. Thank you. Thank you, my lord. I'll protect Red Tide territory with everything I have. What Vel didn't know was that I'd been aware of his potential for a long time. My daily intelligence system had flagged him back when he was still a slave. He had the talent to become a peak-level knight, the highest tier. He would be one of Red Tide territory's greatest fighters someday. The testing took all morning. Out of over 200 children, 8 were chosen. 8 future knights. For a brand new territory, that was a solid number. Training knights required massive resources, but with the family's support, I could manage it. Some small noble houses in the south that had been established for generations only had a few dozen apprentice knights, a handful of full knights, and maybe a couple of elites. With what I had now, I was already on par with them. The real challenge was location. The north was crawling with threats: orcs, barbarian tribes, bandits, rival lords. My intelligence system had been warning me that the Snowsworn were ramping up their raids across the northern province lately, attacking like mad. Thankfully, they were still far from us, but I couldn't let my guard down. I stood on the training ground and looked down at my 8 young recruits. These kids weren't just future knights. They were going to be my inner circle, my personal guard. I assigned them to Barnes, a full knight with solid combat experience and teaching ability. He was the right man to shape them. Their first lesson was breathing technique. Breathing technique is the foundation of everything, Barnes told them. It determines how far you'll go. He demonstrated the breath flow method, a technique from the Calvin family. It wasn't the family's top-tier title breathing that only core members learned, but it was still first-rate. Your body has 7 energy nodes. By practicing this breathing, you activate them and convert the energy in the air into battle aura, which then awakens your bloodline. Barnes breathed in slowly, his chest rising, then exhaled. The kids copied him carefully, trying to feel something inside themselves. At first, nothing happened, but after a while, some of them started sensing it. Vel was the first. I can feel energy entering my body, he whispered. Barnes nodded approvingly. Good. That's step 1. Over the next few days, he pushed them to keep practicing, deepening their understanding. Breathing technique isn't just about building aura, he told them. It's about forging your mind and your will. By the end of those first days, all 8 children could feel the energy flowing through them. They'd grasped the basics. Barnes looked at them with a satisfied expression. You've taken your first step toward becoming knights. It was only the beginning. But watching them train, I felt something settle inside me. These 8 kids were going to become Red Tide Territory's future, loyal, powerful, and mine. I woke up and checked my daily intelligence system like always. 3 updates today, and for once, all of them were actually useful. First, Duke Edmund had decided to rally all his vassals and wipe out the Snow Sworn once and for all. This was both good and bad news. Good because the Snow Sworn had become a nightmare across the north, raiding territories, kidnapping nobles and knights, dragging them off for twisted sacrificial rituals. 6 attacks in the past 2 months alone. They were getting bolder and more violent. If they ever reached Red Tide territory, I didn't have the manpower to stop them. So Edmund crushing them would be a blessing for everyone. The bad part? Under the Northern Expansion Decree, I was technically one of Edmund's vassals. That meant I'd have to answer his call and send troops. Red Tide territory had just stabilized. My forces were still small. Going to war meant losses I could barely afford. But then I reminded myself, I had my intelligence system. It had saved me from danger more times than I could count. With advance warning of battlefield threats, I could dodge the worst of it, maybe even come out ahead. Pick up resources from the chaos. Turn someone else's war into my opportunity. I relaxed a little. Deal with problems as they come. Second update. Vel had activated his bloodline and officially become an apprentice knight. I smiled at that. My system had already told me he had the potential to reach peak knight level, the absolute top. And here he was, already taking his first real step. The kid was something special. Third, a group of ice-armored bears would pass through the northern edge of Red Tide territory tomorrow afternoon. These were terrifying magical creatures, over 7 meters tall when standing, covered in natural ice crystal armor, with half-meter frost iron claws that could freeze your blood on contact. But I wasn't worried. With my current forces, they were manageable, and their meat was incredibly valuable. Eating it could strengthen a knight's body and battle aura. Perfect reward for my knights and the 8 kids in training. Plus, my knights hadn't seen real combat in a while. A good hunt would sharpen them up. I called Lambert. Gather all the knights and archers. We're heading north to hunt tomorrow. He nodded and left to make preparations. Meanwhile, far away in Frost Halberd City, Duke Edmund was losing his patience. Another urgent report had landed on his desk. Another territory hit by the Snow Sworn, all civilians killed, nobles and knights taken. The 6th attack in 2 months. He slammed his fist on the table and called an emergency meeting with his generals, strategists, and top commanders. The plan was simple. Mobilize every vassal, split forces to surround every known Snow Sworn hideout, and destroy them completely. Heavy defenses would stay on the border to keep the northern barbarian tribes from taking advantage of the chaos. Near the end of the meeting, one of his strategists asked whether the Southern Pioneer Lords should be included in the campaign. Edmund sneered. All of them. Those Southern Pioneer Lords are just useless noble brats. If they die, nobody back south will care. Let them go in first. He despised the Southern Pioneers. The Emperor's expansion decree was supposed to bring real strength to the north. Instead, the Southern noble families sent their throwaway children, the weakest, least talented sons they didn't want. Edmund saw this campaign as a chance to get rid of them. Orders went out to every vassal across the north. The entire region was waking up, preparing for a bloody fight. And I was one of the names on that list. I stood on the mountain peak looking down at the ice-armored bears below. Sunlight bounced off their grayish-white hexagonal ice scales, sharp frost iron claws gleaming on their front paws. Blue flames flickered between the plates on their backs whenever they moved. Each one was massive, and every growl they made felt like thunder shaking the ground. There was nothing cute about them. Standing beside me were Lilia and Vel, the only 2 of my 8 knight candidates who had already activated their bloodlines and become apprentice knights. I brought them along as a reward for their hard work, a break from the grind of daily training. Lilia gripped a sword almost as tall as she was, trying to copy the stance of a real knight. Vel straightened his back on his horse, doing his best to look like the genuine thing. Your job is to stay beside me and protect me, I told them quietly. Really, I just didn't want these 2 getting excited and charging down the hill to fight bears 10 times their size. Their eyes went wide. Protecting the Lord? Such an important mission. They stood even straighter and nodded eagerly. When everything was in position, I gave the signal. Begin. The flag officer waved his banner, and hunters moved out from their hiding spots. First, They spread female bear scent across the bear's path. The males reacted immediately, and all 9 bears started drifting toward the canyon we'd chosen. Another team on a distant ridge created rockfall sounds, herding the bears deeper into the trap. They're in the canyon. Execute the plan. Hidden in the canyon floor were rows of sharpened wooden stakes. When the lead bears stepped on them, the stakes punched straight through their unarmored paws. The bears roared in agony, trying to pull free, but their huge bodies made it nearly impossible. The rest of the group stumbled into the same mess, and chaos broke out among them. Next, hunters lit the pine resin and fire oil they'd spread along the canyon walls. Fireballs rolled off the cliffs and crashed into the middle of the bear pack. Flames engulfed the ones pinned by the stakes. The fire couldn't destroy their ice armor, but it scorched their fur and left burn marks across their shells. The pain drove them wild, crashing into each other, exposing their weak points: eyes, throats, joints. Archers on the ridgeline opened fire with flaming arrows. The arrows couldn't pierce the armor, but that wasn't the point. The constant burning drained the bears' stamina. They slowed down. Cracks spread across their ice shells. Some sections melted, revealing the tougher but no longer invincible skin underneath. That's when my knights moved. Now, the command flag dropped. Knights charged out on horseback, swords and lances blazing with crimson battle aura, so intense it warped the air. They aimed for the weakened spots: joints, jaws, throats, eyes. The archers had softened those areas perfectly. One elite knight locked onto a slightly smaller bear whose throat armor was already cracked from arrow fire. His horse tore through the wind as he leveled his lance, aura burning white-hot at the tip, and drove it straight into the crack. Blood and red aura exploded together like molten lava pouring into the bear's body. The creature screamed so loud the canyon shook. Its massive frame trembled and started to buckle. Vel jumped up beside me, eyes on fire. "We got one. The knights are incredible. Don't celebrate yet," I said calmly. "This is only the first phase." He looked confused. The bear was going down, wasn't it? Then the dying bear threw its head back and roared. Cracks tore across its armor, and streams of ice flame erupted from its body like frozen demon wings, spreading a wave of bone-chilling cold through the air. The ice flame hit the atmosphere and detonated in a freezing explosion. "Fall back!" The commander screamed, waving his flag frantically. Several knights got caught in the blast. Their battle aura protected them from the worst, but they scrambled backward, shaken. It didn't stop there. The bear entered full berserker mode. 3 enormous crystal spikes erupted from its back, pulsing with energy, sending out shockwaves that mixed with heat blasts and explosions. The air turned heavy. Every pulse made it hard to breathe. The fight was far from over. Vel watched the battle nervously, worried about the knights down below. The ice-armored bears had gone fully berserk. 3 massive crystal spikes had erupted from each one's back, glowing hot blue, warping the air with heat and sending shockwaves that nearly knocked the knights off their feet. The archers' arrows were now useless. The ice flames evaporated them before they could even reach skin. Phase 2. Now, I ordered. The flag went up, and my knights split into small groups, circling the bears. They darted in and out of the bears' blind spots, taunting them, making them angrier and wilder. Every time a bear swung its massive claws, the knights dodged cleanly. The bears roared in helpless fury, unable to land a single hit. "Keep them moving. Don't let them rest," Lambert shouted from the front. The kiting strategy was working. All 9 bears were pushed to their absolute limit, energy pouring out of them uncontrollably. Trees snapped, rocks crumbled, the ground shook. "It's happening. Their energy is about to blow." Lilia called out beside me, eyes wide. "Just wait," I said, watching the crystals on their backs carefully. Every detail mattered now. Then Lambert saw his opening. Now, he led 6 elite knights and 23 full knights in a coordinated strike. They charged straight at the raging bears and drove their weapons into the crystal cores on their backs. The reaction was instant and violent. The crystal spikes flashed wildly, and massive waves of energy exploded outward. Cold flames formed a storm that tore across the entire battlefield. "Pull back. Now!" Lambert screamed over the deafening blast. The knights retreated just in time. Smoke, fire, and ice shards filled the air. 9 simultaneous energy explosions ripped through the canyon. The ice armor shattered into fragments that flew everywhere. When the smoke cleared, all 9 bears lay dead in the center of the battlefield. Their ice shells had actually protected the bodies from being completely destroyed, so the meat and materials were still usable. Some of the crystal spikes remained intact, still radiating faint power. I looked over the scene and exhaled. Not a single knight was hurt. Not even a horse was injured. A perfect hunt. Vel and Lilia stood beside me, eyes shining with admiration as they watched the knights on the field below. "We'll be able to do that too someday, right?" Lilia whispered. Vel didn't say anything. He just nodded firmly. The knights got to work collecting the spoils. Every part of an ice-armored bear was valuable. The meat was dense, fragrant, and known as one of the best supplements for knights. It could strengthen their bodies and increase their battle aura reserves. In the south, it sold for enormous prices. The crystals from their backs could be turned into powerful potions or magical items by alchemists, practically priceless. Even the claws and teeth were worth a fortune. I looked at the carcasses and briefly wished I could just start a bear farm. Every inch of these creatures was useful, but raising them would be suicide. Red Tide territory would be blown sky-high within 2 days. I smiled at the busy knights and made a decision. "Everyone, stop!" They all turned to face me. "Tonight, we feast. We're using this bear meat for a celebration banquet." The knights erupted in cheers. All the tension from the battle vanished instantly. "My lord, that's too generous. This meat is priceless. A warrior's dream. Praise the great lord." I listened to them cheer and felt genuinely satisfied. These knights hadn't been raised by me. They came from the family. The only way to earn their true loyalty was through real rewards. Give them enough, and they'd fight with everything they had. And with the Snowsworn campaign looming ahead, this bear meat would give my forces a real boost in strength. We were going to need it. By the time I rode back to the territory with the bear carcasses, the sky was getting dark. It had already been a great day, but then it got even better. Bradley handed me a letter from my father. The Duke's second round of support had arrived. 6 elite knights, 20 full knights, and 60 apprentice knights. That nearly doubled my military strength overnight. He also sent 3 alchemy apprentices. Not many, but enough to set up a proper magic marrow refining operation. The best part? He approved my proposal. All mining and processing would stay in Red Tide territory. The family would only handle sales. I had full control. But the last line of the letter gave me a chill. "You are always a member of the Calvin family." No direct threat, but the message was clear. He knew what I was doing, and he was reminding me not to push too far. I set the letter down and stretched. 2 pieces of good news in one day. That evening, I held the feast in a large tent. This wasn't for regular citizens. Ice-armored bear meat was far too valuable for that. The guests were my knights, the ones who'd been with me from the start, the new arrivals from the family, and my 8 young knight trainees. Plates of perfectly roasted bear meat came out, golden brown on the outside, tender and juicy inside. The smell alone filled the entire tent. Bradley stood to the side, directing servants to hand out portions. 1 serving per person. The new knights couldn't believe their eyes. "This is actual ice-armored bear meat," one young knight stammered, jaw practically on the floor. "In the south, only the wealthiest nobles get to eat this kind of thing. Maybe once at a big banquet," another whispered. "Regular knights wouldn't dare even touch it." One of my veteran knights overheard and shrugged casually. "This level is rare here too, sure. But we eat regular magical beast meat about once a month. Don't make a big deal out of it." The new knights nearly fell off their chairs. Once a month? They'd come north expecting misery, and instead they were eating better than half the southern nobility. I could see their attitudes shifting in real time. Whatever resentment they'd carried about being sent to this frozen wasteland was melting away, replaced by loyalty. I stood up and raised my cup. "Thank you all for your hard work. Tonight isn't just about celebrating the hunt. It's a welcome for our new members. From the hunting grounds to the battlefield, we'll face hardships together and share the rewards together. Remember, as long as I have food, so do you. Long live the Lord. Long live the Lord," they chanted, cups in the air. Then came the eating. Vel sat among the knights, practically glowing with pride. He carefully cut a piece of bear meat and took his first bite. The moment it hit his stomach, a wave of heat rushed through his entire body. His eyes went wide. He could feel his blood surging, his energy exploding from within. He put down his knife and fork, crossed his legs, and started running his breathing technique to channel the energy flowing through him. Warmth traveled along his energy pathways. His muscles tightened. His bones felt like they were being hammered and refined. Then, a breakthrough. He jumped to mid-level apprentice knight. Barnes, his trainer, stared at him in disbelief. Didn't he just become an apprentice knight yesterday? His talent is this strong, but Vel wasn't the only one. One by one, knights across the tent started feeling their energy surge. They stopped eating, sat down cross-legged, and began breathing exercises. The noisy celebration went completely silent, replaced by the deep, rhythmic sound of dozens of knights channeling power at the same time. Minutes later, cheers erupted. Several knights had broken through to new levels. The congratulations and praise came flooding in. Following Lord Calvin means we eat well, live well, and get stronger. We can never repay the Lord's generosity. It's our honor to serve him. I stood there watching, honestly amazed. The banquet had worked far better than I ever expected. The deadline for the campaign against the Snow Sworn was getting closer. I grabbed a few knights and carried 2 heavy boxes over to the magic marrow processing workshop near the mine. Silco and 3 new alchemy apprentices had built the place. Really just a few shacks with equipment shipped from the southeast. Basic, but functional enough to start refining. Perfect timing, my lord, Silco said, leaning lazily against a post. He looked slightly less exhausted now that he had help, but still had that sluggish air about him. The first batch of marrow just finished. I looked into the wooden barrel he pointed at. It was filled with fine, deep purple powder that shimmered faintly with magical energy. I pinched some between my fingers, incredibly smooth. This is magic marrow. Yep. This one barrel is worth at least 50 gold coins on the market. 50 gold coins. Enough to buy 100 slaves or support 2 full knights for a year. And this was just from a small trial run. Thinking about the massive deposit sitting under my territory made my pulse quicken. Of course, scaling up would take time. Mining was dangerous, and we were short on equipment and manpower. This single barrel represented a full week's output. I rewarded them on the spot. 20 gold coins for Silco, 10 each for the apprentices. They were stunned. One of them muttered, "But where do we even spin this out here?" We all had a good laugh at that. Then I got to the real point. "Silco, can this stuff be used to make flame bombs?" He frowned. "Flame bombs need more than just marrow. You need ignition cores and other materials. We don't have any of that." I coughed and signaled my knights to open the 2 boxes they'd carried in. The lids came off, and a wave of magical energy hit everyone in the face. Inside were deep blue crystals, the spikes we'd pulled from the ice-armored bears, packed with enormous energy. Silco and the apprentices went completely still. Their eyes nearly popped out. "These are top-grade alchemy materials," one apprentice shouted. "You could make high-level magical items with these." Silco looked at me, piecing it together. "You want to?" I patted the box. "With these plus the marrow, can you make flame bombs?" He nodded slowly, then immediately shook his head, looking horrified. No. This is insane. Magic marrow is already precious. Adding ice-armored bear crystals? Using both of these top-tier materials for simple flame bombs is an absolute waste. These could be used for enchanted weapons, armor, magical artifacts. Things worth 10 times more. I waved him off. "Can you do it or not?" He sighed. "If you insist. I need them by the day after tomorrow at the latest." His eye twitched. He wanted to argue more, but just shrugged and sent the apprentices scrambling to work. I stood watching them get started when hoofbeats thundered outside. "My lord," a knight galloped in, jumped off his horse, and dropped to one knee. "A messenger from Duke Edmund is at the gates," I sighed. "Here it comes." I straightened my cloak and headed over. At the meeting hall, a knight in a dark blue cape stood waiting, armor engraved with Duke Edmund's family crest. This wasn't an ordinary messenger. He knelt and delivered the message. "Lord Louis Calvin, Duke Edmund commands all northern lords to mobilize immediately and march to eliminate the Snow-Sworn rebels." He handed me a sealed letter. I opened it and scanned the contents. The tone was harsh. Every lord had to personally lead troops to a designated assembly point. Each territory had to provide a minimum number of soldiers. Any delay or refusal would be treated as treason against the empire. My assembly point was Snow Eagle City, the stronghold of Count Rivers, who governed the Snow Peak County. Red Tide territory technically fell under his jurisdiction, though I'd never actually met him since pioneer lords were tax-exempt and the north was simply too vast. I looked up at the messenger. "I'll be there on time." He bowed and rode off to deliver the same orders to the next territory. Once he was gone, I reread the letter carefully, doing the math. I had a few days to prepare. The flame bombs needed to be ready. My troops needed to be organized. The clock was ticking. With only a few days before the campaign, I needed to squeeze every bit of fighting power out of my forces. I brought SIV to the training grounds to check on progress. Her jaw dropped when she saw the soldiers drilling. This was her first time watching our full battle formations, and they were nothing like what she'd seen before. Most lords in this world just throw peasants together into a wall of meat and hope the mass holds against a cavalry charge. It never works. Knights tear through them every time. My soldiers used something different. The layered formation, inspired by a tactic from my past life. General Wu Lin's strategy that destroyed the Jin dynasty's heavily armored cavalry at Xianren Pass. 3 layers, each with a specific job. First layer, archers. They stood in front, split into 3 rotating groups for continuous fire. One group shoots while the others reload. The key was their target, not the knights, since battle aura made them hard to kill with arrows. We aimed at the horses. Regular war horses had no armor and couldn't use aura. Hit their legs or bellies, and the entire cavalry charge falls apart. Second layer, spearmen. Once the archers disrupted the charge and the horses slowed down, shielded spearmen stepped forward with 4 to 6 meter lances pointed straight ahead. They forced riders to break or lose control, knocking knights off their mounts. Third layer, axemen. Hidden behind the spearmen, they waited until the cavalry was stuck, then rushed out with heavy blades and axes. Target, horse legs first, then the fallen riders. Even low-level knights with battle aura protection would struggle against several trained axemen swarming them at close range. "This can actually kill aura warriors," SIV finally spoke up, unable to hold back. "Not the high-ranking ones," I said, a little proud. "But against apprentice and regular knights, it's devastating." The formation couldn't stop the real monsters, the elite knights who could fight 100 men alone. But for the lower ranks, it was a death trap. A single well-trained infantry squad could take down several knights using these tactics. Still, soldiers were support. The real battle would always come down to knights with battle aura. We moved to the other side of the training field where my cavalry was practicing their own system, the swarm tactic, which I'd adapted for northern terrain. Knights split into small squads of 3 to 5 full knights leading 10 to 20 apprentices. The approach had 3 stages: harass, feint, then concentrate fire. One squad would rush in, throw javelins or shoot arrows, then pull back immediately. Another squad would attack from the flank, faking a main charge to force the enemy to shift their defense. The 2 squads would cycle this over and over, wearing the enemy down. Then, when the enemy wavered or their commander made a mistake, a hidden squad would burst out and hit the key target with everything they had. Maximum damage in minimum time. The whole system relied on staying mobile. Never commit to a head-on fight. Keep circling, keep draining, and strike the moment you see weakness. Watching the drills, horses thundering across the field, lances punching through wooden targets, arrows hitting their marks. My knights had gotten this down after months of training. The veterans moved like it was second nature. The newcomers still made small mistakes, but they were fitting into the system quickly. I nodded with satisfaction. This approach protected my cavalry while steadily grinding down the enemy. Much smarter than the mindless charges most lords favored. SIV watched silently, clearly shaken. Every order was executed instantly, every movement precise. This was completely different from how northern tribal warriors fought. They just charged in as a mob, relying on individual strength and bravery. If all imperial knights fought like mine, the northern tribes would be in serious danger. Her fists tightened. I could tell her thoughts were complicated. She wanted the traitors who killed her family dead, but if the empire swept through the north with this kind of force, innocent people from her father's tribe could get caught in it too. "Stop daydreaming. Let's go check the alchemy workshop," I said, snapping her out of it. She glanced at me, but said nothing and followed. I was feeling good. The soldiers had the layered formation down. The knights had mastered the swarm tactics. Everyone was several times stronger than when they first arrived at Red Tide territory. Now I just needed the flame bombs. If Silco's team had finished them, I'd go into this fight with real confidence. And if they hadn't, well, I'd make Silco work around the clock until they were done. No mercy. I pulled on the reins and rode toward the workshop, SIV, and my escort knights right behind me.